This is Judge Joe Brown, and we're listening to We All Be News. News-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Okay, one of the things we need to take into context about our current situation is how we got where we are. One of the big factors in that is J. Edgar Hoover. Now, there's some things that are not apparent on the surface about that man, and one of them is that he had a pathological hatred for the Klan. And it turns out one of the reasons is because the Klan used to harass his parents for allegedly passing for white. So if you look at early pictures of J. Edgar Hoover, you see somebody that looks quite a bit like Harold Ford Jr., the former congressman from the area. Now, the FBI got started in an unusual fashion, and that is something that happened because they were after Jack Johnson, the first black world heavyweight champion. So the FBI was set up to investigate whether or not there was trafficking interstate in prostitution and other things. And they wound up passing what they call the Mann Act. And the Mann Act was to prosecute taking women across state lines for immoral purposes. So they eventually got Jack Johnson because he took his wife, who was white, through the corner of a state on a train that did not acknowledge black-white marriages at the time. Very few in the Old South did, and they considered that anybody that was trying to do that was doing it for immoral purposes. So they prosecuted him, convicted him, and sent him to the penitentiary. Now, J. Edgar Hoover got his start with the FBI as an investigator assigned to the New York brothels. And he had eventually a big store of blackmail, extortion type information on a lot of the elected officials in the New York City area. He was gay, didn't like women particularly, never went out on a date, and was basically afraid of them. His mother got in on him about that, and there's a pretty good rendition of his family and background circumstances that Clint Eastwood did in his movie J. Edgar. It's quite fascinating to see that thing, and I checked out the details that Eastwood put in there, and they appear to be very accurate. Anyway, with this blackmail information, he wound up getting a lot of influence. After World War I, when they got prohibition, they assigned the FBI that had a limited scope at that time of investigative powers to look into legal and illegal alcohol production. On the legal side, it was to keep track of legal alcohol production, and that's why for the longest time, to be an FBI agent, rather than special agents, you had to be an attorney specializing in tax matters or a certified public accountant. Strange qualifications for being a so-called FBI agent. They weren't allowed to carry guns, and that came about later with J. Edgar extorting a lot of elected officials who were in Congress. Well, I guess you have to be an elected official to be in Congress, just congressmen and senators that he had dirt on, and they wound up allowing them to do it. So he hired a number of homicidal maniac type detectives and cops, Melvin Purvis, Elliot Ness and such like, to add muscle to the FBI, and he did a lot of PR and hype on it. Mostly what the FBI did at that time was record the VIN numbers off of stolen vehicles recovered in interstate commerce and do after the fact investigations of bank robberies. they wound up having this thing about communism, and J. Edgar, being somebody that was nervous about his own black ancestry, did like so many who don't like what they are, such as, say, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. They hate themselves and they hate their people, and they take every opportunity to down them. Well, J. Edgar Hoover got in some real deep intelligence sources on what black people were doing when the first two long-term presidents of the NAACP were recruited not as informants but as sworn FBI agents. The Jewish population had supported the NAACP to help themselves out. In other words, if you couldn't do it to a Negro, you couldn't do it to a Jew. And for a long time, the NAACP fought segregation and discrimination against Negroes by using the ASPCA laws. In other words, Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. So the theory on that is if you couldn't do it to a dog, you couldn't do it to a Negro. If you couldn't do it to a Negro, you couldn't do it to a Jew. So the FBI was long deep into the NAACP, and they infiltrated a lot of the black organizations. Hoover had this cockeyed theory that the communists were controlling the civil rights movement and had gotten control of black churches in the South. He also found out that too many black ministers, then as now, like to swing and being a bit kinky about what they're doing. They became, in that day and time, subject to a lot of blackmail. And J. Edgar Hoover, being gay, also hated others of like persuasion. It's not obvious as to why, but if you know the syndrome, then you can understand it. So he got in a lot of information. A lot of black leaders and black preachers at the time swung both ways, or basically only went one way, or they were pedophiles, and he controlled a lot of them. And the civil rights movement was basically showed because of that. Eventually what happens is you get militancy developing in the mid-60s. I know young people on the West Coast, self-included, didn't have much respect for civil rights activity because we thought basically, what are you doing down on your knees getting beat across your head by some racist who's supposed to feel guilty after a while? That's not any fight or struggle, that's just getting your butt beat.
Right.
So there was a militancy that was developing on school campuses around the country. There was just a lack of further tolerance that developed in the youth through the inner cities. And from 64 to about 66 or 67, we had a lot of inner city riots. LBJ surprised everybody. That's Lyndon Baines Johnson when he became president, and probably the most ruthless, unprincipled politician in American history getting to supreme power, became one of the most principled ones when he got there. He did not like John F. Kennedy's so-called civil rights bill. He yanked it and substituted another, and he put an end run on the Southern politicians that he had been close to by making it a military bill. Most people don't know this, but the Civil Rights Bill of 1964 has an interesting preamble that's something like, whereas the United States of America is engaged in a life or death struggle with the forces of communism and totalitarianism, and whereas the military is our first line of defense, whereas it's been long integrated, whereas the morale of the troops and military personnel is paramount in their ability to defend the country, and whereas there are certain parts of the country where base commanders have no control over the bigoted, biased, and discriminatory treatment that certain military personnel and their families suffer, be it resolved that we need this bill to protect their civil rights and also the civil rights of their remote kin and relatives, etc. So nobody passed that out of the goodness of their heart, inspired by civil rights. It was a military consideration. When you got the Voting Rights Act in 1968, I ultimately worked for a think tank in the early 70s, and we researched that. There were 60-some thousand pages of the congressional record we went over. There were less than 10 that were devoted to any concern about civil rights, and most of the rest of the 60,000 pages were concerned about the damage being done to inner cities with the rioting and insurrection, or uprisings as we like to call them. Now, I was going into college when the '65 riot took place in L.A., and we called it an uprising. It was very interesting. There was a lot of gang activity, killing. They had Slausons, Del Vikings, businessmen, Bobtown, De La Soul gangs out in L.A. But by a month after that riot, the tensions had been dissolved and evaporated, and I don't think there was a black-on-black homicide except 2 in the next 18 months in L.A., and that was, in one case, if I recall correctly, a woman shooting her husband and a girlfriend shooting her boyfriend. There were no rapes, no robberies, no burglaries, assaults dropped to 0. Everybody was peaceful. LAPD had gotten run out, and they had to bring in the National Guard, so cops started patrolling 2 at a time. They looked straight ahead, didn't look at anybody, and they got taunted. And they wouldn't answer calls, but there were no calls to answer because the crime dropped to 0. It was slum clearance. A lot of dilapidated, torn down businesses got burnt down, or buildings rather, and interestingly enough, community committees would stand out in front of the businesses of Jewish, Korean, foreign parties who treated their customers with dignity and respect. Don't burn this place down, this guy's all right. But be that as it may, somewhere around 66 or 67, you started getting militancy, black power. I'm black and I'm proud. Ungawa, black power. You started getting the feminists getting active, the Hispanics, Latinos, Chicanos, they started getting active. The Native Americans started getting active, and I'm a Native American too, so I got it both ways. And there was a lot of change that went on in terms of sometimes violent demands and enforcement of demands that everything that the law promises be actualized. So we had the development of the Black Student Union movement around the country, and I know we had some pragmatic things to deal with. When I got at UCLA in 1965, which incidentally was the same time Hillary Clinton went to college, and whereas she was a Republican all through the 60s, and in fact had supported Barry Goldwater for president when she was a senior in college, and ultimately Richard Nixon in 1968, and wanted the rest of us to go to jail for being militant. That's before she became a Democrat, after she got in law school about the same time I did. But in any event, see, she was one of those creatures of the petty bourgeois, and her father had worked in the finance industry, so we thought she was a total irrelevance. Meanwhile, Bernie, he was down. You'd run into him around the country, there'd be 300 or 400 black folk, he's the only white guy in there, and he didn't feel uncomfortable. So I don't know where in the devil these colored Negroes off of a plantation decided to love Hillary Clinton so much in favor of over Bernie Sanders, who actually went to jail to fight segregation in housing, both in Chicago generally and in the University of Chicago, and became the president of a CORE, that's Congress of racial equality chapter in Chicago. We have no sense. I think it's got to do with this anti-masculine imagery that's in the head of too many black women, but that's another thing. But in any event, we started actualizing black power, and when I got in UCLA, we had somewhere around 64,000 full-time students. We had 73 full-time black grad students and 72 full-time black undergrads for 145, which is disgraceful. Now that's the same school Jackie Robinson, the baseball player, had gone to. Don Barksdale, the first brother to play in the NBA, played for the Lakers. Kenny Washington, who played football in the same black field with the other two, was the first brother to play for the NFL. He played for the Rams, who were in Cleveland then in L.A., then back to St. Louis, and then to St. Louis, now back to L.A., and guess what? Magic Johnson owns them.
Wow.
So he's a third owner of the Lakers. So the Lakers moved from Minnesota to L.A., so you got that UCLA connection with all of the sports. All three of these people played in the same backfield playing football. Don Barksdale wasn't a basketball player, he was a football player and ran high hurdles. Jackie Robinson ran track, played football, never played baseball. And Kenny Washington played football, and he got hired by the Rams, and then they hired Woody Strode, who was the actor, and then they hired the first two brothers out of Grambling, a guy named Deacon Dan Tyler and another one named Tank Younger. So you've got that UCLA connection. We had Ralph Brunch, one of the executives in the UN after it started, and there's a big, tall, waffle-looking building on campus named after him. And Tom Bradley ran track and went to UCLA, and he became the first African-American mayor since California had come into the Union. There had been a black one who was actually the first mayor of LA, period. He was a Hispanic, but that was 150 years before that. So we had a long black connection, but few black folk. And I played football, but at the time I started playing football, there were only 3 brothers on the football team. Wow. And see, we decided to change that. So between 1965 and 1969, we got in 1,500 more African Americans. We had 2 programs bringing in 250 to 500 each, which was the first set of this affirmative action bit. We did it on the basis of competitive assessment of aptitude tests, grade point average, and other factors that indicated an ability to succeed, because we said if we didn't use that other factors category and criteria, then we were going to get into reverse discrimination. Now it turned out that that was a setup. The case that attacked affirmative action and started this reverse discrimination case was known as Bakke. Some colored folk who wanted to get into medical school but didn't want what they called the political test of what else have you been doing, i.e. other factors that indicate an ability to succeed. They just wanted to have the highest grade point averages and aptitude test for black people, but that without that third factor being involved would be reverse discrimination, but they set it up, and here we are now with all of the fight against affirmative action. California ought to be ashamed of itself because their Constitution sets up the University of California and a state college system separately. The state college system is now known as the state university system. But the University of California was set up under a provision of the state constitution that said you need leadership in industry, finance, academia, community leadership, industry, arts, and sciences. In all communities, and in fact they mentioned black folk, they said our colored brethren who have so recently been in slavery or escaped from slavery, they need their leadership. So do our Hispanic brethren who were led by gangs, etc. our Asian brethren, and they went on down the line. So you see there's this thing of indications of ability to succeed, and we put in the factor that we wanted to maximize the fallout to the respective communities when a minority person was admitted, which is exactly what the California Constitution sets forth as a goal for the state. Now, this is from 1851, before the Civil War. Well, we set this up, but then at that point in LA City, we had the development of the Black Panther Party, which a guy named Sherman Banks founded there, and he was a student at Cal State LA. We had a lot of students who were also Black Student Union, BSU participants in there. We got a bad thing that developed once it got expanded into the neighborhood, and we got in a lot of former members of the gang known as the Slawsons, who became Panthers. At that same time, there was a guy named Ron Everett who had been student body president out at LA City College and had a Jamaican accent. He's got wavy hair and blue-green eyes, and you see him now, he's been shaving his head for 50 years, and he's got a mustache and always wears shades, and he's got this fake accent where he goes, brothers, there's much that the black man needs to know. Have some evidence, not at all necessary for you to trouble your heads, because I, Maulana, will teach you. They call it Maulana. And if you recall the Million Man March 20 years ago, Minister Farrakhan brought him up and said, we have Ron Karenga that a lot of the African American community has great animosity to, but in the spirit of reconciliation, Brother Karenga, if you'd like to come up and say some remarks. That's because Karenga and allegedly others started becoming informants for the FBI, and in Los Angeles for the SIS, Special Investigative Squad of LAPD. And in those days, they were trying to get back on top after having been run out of South Central LA. They didn't call it that then, that was a little later. Now the LA City Council says it has such a derogatory connotation that they don't want anybody to say South Central. But in any event, there were a lot of killings of activists and militant black leaders and students that went on, and we knew it was the US organization with Karenga. That's one reason I will not celebrate Kwanzaa, because it's one of his creatures. And I think he's a scoundrel, and he needs to pay some costs, some one way or the other, for what he did. Some good, close, and personal friends of mine died as a result of his activities. Now, I was the community liaison for the Black Student Union, so I associated with the Panther Party, with community organizations, with the Brown Berets, which was a Chicano organization, Native American organizations, Asian organizations, SDS, Students for Democratic Society. They were white, but they got involved, and we were all trying to make things happen. There was some involvement with us, but once we began to discover their connection with the FBI and the LA Police Department, or at least the SIS unit, we distanced ourselves and we started doing our own investigations, and the people that came up dead looked like they were murdered by us. Now, I, along with a handful of other people, started setting up a minority studies department out at UCLA, a nascent department, and we had special admissions, special education for minorities. That we got all of the ethnic groups together to start. We got a building known as Campbell Hall. Now we have bunch hall that is devoted to it, and half of the, oh, they're so this and that student and faculty types that are so proper. They don't even know how the Department of Minority Studies started up. And some people died. So Karenga wanted to get himself insinuated as head of the Minority Studies Department. So we had started bringing in a lot of African Americans, tripled, quadrupled the number in there. And the first group, they were down. You know, everybody from Big Lou, now known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jabbar the basketball player, and Mike Warren and Lucius Allen. If you wanted something done, brother, let's go. We got to move on to econ department. So they were there with us. But now you started getting this second group we got in. And brothers, I understand that you've made so many sacrifices on our behalf, and I wouldn't be here without you. It's not that I don't appreciate it, but I can't afford to jeopardize my career, so you'll have to go on without me, but I'll be there with you in spirit. Drag that fool, bring him. One of them who tried, well, actually became on an illegal election the BSU president. He was so scared we drug him and he urinated on himself. He had gray pants and there was a stain down his left leg and a puddle of urine all by his left shoe when we drug him onto the confrontation. LAPD was there, LA County Sheriff's Department, the Highway Patrol, the university cops, and he was shaking. We had to hold this dude up. He almost collapsed. But anyway, he's dead now, so let's not talk too harshly about the dead. But I don't have anything good to say about him. Didn't like his mama, daddy, or his sister either. They tried to work being good colored too hard. But anyway, Karenga ran into an interesting roadblock. We had recruited John Huggins, who was a Panther from back east, and Bunchy Carter, who had been president, chairman of the Slawsons, the gang, who had just gotten out of the penitentiary. He's about 27, 28 years old, and he'd been totally ignorant and stupid until he went and did time. Then he taught himself to read and write, started reading and writing poetry a lot. We actually got pretty good. We recruited him. And there was another individual, Geronimo Pratt, who was very intelligent, and this guy was a little different. He'd done 3 tours in Vietnam and had been part of the Green Beret bunch, and he was out there. But he was smart, so we recruited him. He became a Panther. We got Elaine Brown, who was a student. She became a Panther, and there was a guy named Nathaniel Clark, who we recruited as a student. He became a Panther, and there were others. So Karenga's efforts to try and co-opt this nascent minority admissions and studies program ran afoul of some of the students that were already there. Now, there was a pretty eclectic group of black students at UCLA, and I remember one guy, I won't mention his name, he was a little older, in his 30s, and I said, man, I know you from somewhere. See, I'd grown up in South Central LA. So eventually we were drinking some wine back in those days. What was it? Akadama Red, I think it was, or Manischewitz Cream White Concord or something like that. Something nasty that made me throw up if I smelled it now. But he confided in me, and I said, oh man, I knew you. I said, man, you used to run part of those rackets with the numbers rackets for the mob out in South Central. And then I found out he eventually worked for what was going to have been a father-in-law of mine. He had kind of worked for the organization and ran the numbers bank. He's a very interesting character. Had a beautiful daughter. I regret I didn't go ahead and marry that woman, but it was another thing. But anyway, Bunchy Carter and John Huggins were on campus one day for a meeting. We had a call meeting. So 4 guys from us showed up, Stadi Ali, 2 twin brothers and another guy. I can't remember their names. And in front of 42 witnesses in the cafeteria, Campbell Hall, they gunned these guys down.
Wow.
Shot John Huggins twice in the back, Bunchy Carter in the chest, and hell, they ran up to my office and put 3 bullets, maybe 4 in the back of my chair. They thought I was in there, but I wasn't.
Wow.
It got real exciting, and the vice chancellor at that time was African American, and he was the acting chancellor. And they were having a meeting with chancellors of European universities. So LAPD went a mile across campus, snatched him out of the meeting at gunpoint, put a riot gun to the back of his head, marched the acting chancellor a mile across campus back to the scene and handcuffed him to a chair. I got rounded up, handcuffed to a chair. They kept us in there for 4 hours interrogating everybody. And we tried to cooperate, and we got told by the 2 homicide detectives assigned to the case that we were right. The US organization was working for them, because every time they went out to bust them, somebody from inside would tip them off. So they've got the names, addresses, and in one case, the phone numbers of the perpetrators of the homicide. They caught the 2 accessories, they prosecuted them. They went to jail, but these are the 2 twin brothers. They got sent to a work camp. They were there for less than 2 or 3 weeks. They escaped. They took down the bulletin on them within 48 hours, and I saw them about a year later at a function at the Palladium that a guy named Ayuko Babu was giving. He's president of the Pan-African Film Festival now. And we were raising funds for Frelimo so they could get equipment and combat boots. That's a guerrilla organization in Africa. The State Department wouldn't let us send the boots themselves, so we had to send the money. So Stevie Wonder, Pharoah Sanders, Oscar Brown Jr., Taj Mahal, they gave a concert that lasted until the sun came up. Really, it was down. But in any event, what happened is there they were, these 2 that had gotten convicted of murder. And this was 2 years after it happened, 3 years after it happened. There they are sitting in the audience. Well, eventually they tried to turn themselves in. 25 years later, they got told, forget about it, nobody was interested. Apparently, the 2 that actually did the shooting tried about 25 or 30 years later themselves and got told, we don't want you. Have a nice day. Now, another person in there, Geronimo Pratt, got set up for murder in the 1st degree for 3 or 4 homicides, and eventually Johnny Cochran got him out. Now, I wound up being a witness on that because there was some false information about some kind of tip I supposedly gave the police, which I didn't. So I got in, gave an affidavit. I was practicing law. No, I never said that, never talked to these people. Cochran used it and got Pratt out of jail. Now, it was all kinds of things going on. I can remember we'd be talking in a community meeting, and the US folk would be taking shorthand notes. The FBI would pick you up at UCLA 2 weeks later, take you downtown LA, your car's out in the UCLA parking lot, you're 20-some miles away. They'd take all your money, they'd interrogate you, and they would quote to you exactly what you had said at a meeting, that these guys were taking down shorthand. And it got really cumbersome. Did you say so-and-so? We haven't, overturned the First Amendment, freedom of speech, have we? I've got nothing to say. Talking about, well, you obviously are trying to quote to me, you say what I said, so what do you think of what I said? I've got no comment. You know, you had to be careful because, you see, under the Fifth Amendment, you have a right to remain silent. And if you're talking to a state cop, you can say, I don't know any damn thing about it, go to hell. I've got nothing to say. They can't do anything about you, but if you say anything to the FBI other than I have nothing to say or no comment or I refuse, you can say I know nothing about it, but they can show maybe somebody talked to you about it, so they'd prosecute you for making a false statement. Later I ran into that, and a lot of clients I defended on a federal basis, 15, 16, 18 counts, indictments, we'd win everything, but I don't know what's going on. The statement to the investigators, and they get them for that. But it was what it was, and I'm digressing. But that was part of a carefully calculated move to destroy militancy and firm advocacy in the black neighborhoods, and to replace the militant guys who were trying to do something with this passive good Negro bunch who was riding in on the tail end of John F. Kennedy's educational push. In those days, education was free. For example, in California and other states, we had no tuition at the University of California, the state college, or the city college system. It was free. I think we paid $100-some or something like that for incidental fees that got you free medical care, free prescription, free eyeglasses, free dental care, all the free tickets to the concerts, academic events, athletic events, you know, so nothing cost you. Then Ronald Reagan got elected as governor in 1968, campaigning on a platform to destroy free public higher education, and he promptly started trying to do that. Now, one of the other people we got in was Angela Davis as a professor. She was a personal friend, and there was a guy named Ronald DeFries. Guy Sinke, and another individual that shocked me turned out to be, I heard him testify as a #1 undercover officer for SIS. He wasn't an informant. He wrote a book called Inside the Glass House, and he talked about how he set up Angela Davis. He burglarized her home, took some weapons she had, and gave them to this young guy who was related to one of the Soledad brothers. He was 15 and not too tightly wrapped, and that set up that whole thing with this alleged escape from the Kern County courthouse. So it was a frame, but that was part of Ronald Reagan talking about the universities infiltrated with communists, and the LA Times challenged him to find one. So he wound up getting through this guy, Elville Younger, information on Angela, who had been in the Shea Lumumba Club when she was 19 years old. So it is what it is. So he started pointing to her, saying, see, there's a commie. They said, Angela Davis? You got to be kidding me. See, Angela was a dynamic sister, but she wasn't very inspiring when she spoke. I took a class from her. She'd put you to sleep in 5 minutes. But she was a beautiful sister, very intelligent. But see, we started getting black professors into, we were trying to do things. But these good Negroes they got in, they let us down. And 9 years ago, maybe 8, maybe 10, 96,000 full-time students at UCLA, they admitted one African-American freshman. You know, and people are satisfied with what's going on right now. And then you got a clown like this late idiot, Scalia. I never liked him. I always thought he was a farce and not that bright. But he started quoting this UCLA law professor about black students would be happier in second-tier universities. Now, this guy is married to a colored woman, and he's got several half-colored children, and he would want to talk about we aren't fit to be in a place like that. See, he's got some personal hang-ups because he thinks he's got a little penis or something like that, and he gets bent out of shape because his wife used to have a black boyfriend out here, and so he tries to down us intellectually. But I didn't go through a minority program to get in UCLA Law School. I got in the front door. And we did all right. We made a pretty good track record for ourselves. But you see, we do what we can do, and a lot of us are disappointed that what we tried to do has devolved into where it is now. Like in Memphis, we've got all these house Negroes that are elected to represent us. The Democratic Party is a joke. It's a social club. You talk to people on the Central Committee and they couldn't explain or discuss economic policy, educational policy, foreign policy, the finance industry, investment banking, or any of these things because they don't care. And too many of the people that run things around here on our side have compromised themselves by petty criminality. They've taken under the table handouts, over the table handouts. They aren't good. Like Ronnie Coleman, for example, was selected by Bill Clinton to be the U.S. attorney, and she was the first African American female to be U.S. attorney in this area since Reconstruction. But it turned out that it was Kenneth Turner, the Republican 8th grade dropout, so-called judge of juvenile court, Curtis Persons, a Republican that worked as a special judge at juvenile court and was chairman of the state Senate Judicial Committee and the Republican county party chair, who went to Senator Sasser, senior Democratic senator, and made a deal with him to essentially run Bill Frist, Dr. Frist, against him instead of Fred Thompson if he would nominate Ronnie Coleman, a Republican plant. Our current U.S. Attorney, Ed Stanton III, I understand, has been nominated at a very young age to be a U.S. Federal District Court judge by a Republican senator from the state of Tennessee. So we have not had an opportunity to do what the Republicans have done, which is anytime one of us looked cross-eyed, we got prosecuted. They get away with everything these days. The district attorney, Amy Wyrick, turns a blind eye to chicanery, over-the-table bribery, and that's what I call a lot of stuff that goes on now. Since the Supreme Court reiterated this thing that corporations are quasi-people, fictitious people entitled to all of the rights of peoples and can have no restriction on donations. You get large white Republican firms get government contracts at a ridiculous rate, and they take some of that money and donate it to the Republican cause. Juvenile courts probably got $22, $23 million in a sequestered bank account. And they're using it as collateral to leverage and finance campaign loans and advancements. $22 million can probably leverage out $180, $150 million. And we've got a presidential campaign. I'm looking at Hillary Clinton and what is it, $220,000 a pop for speaking for events 30 minutes at a time that Goldman Sachs set up, and I'm looking at, oh wow, bought off, looking at our former staunch Republican supporter from the 60s, now Democratic Party nominee, it looks like, but then I look at Goldman Sachs and I look at Barack Obama and Michelle worked for a Republican law firm, in Chicago that had Goldman Sachs as a primary client. I look at his stepfather, Lolo Soetoro, who used Goldman Sachs as his American financier. And Lolo Soetoro was CEO, president, and founder of the primary oil company in Indonesia, where probably the world's largest oil reserves are located, after having been international vice president for Standard Oil and a major in the Indonesian Army reserves, and he was in charge of the death squad, so he had muscle. Obama's got a huge trust fund that he's beneficiary of out of Indonesia that uses Goldman Sachs as its financier. He appointed Geithner as Treasury Secretary, who was chief consultant for Goldman Sachs. The last two people confirmed for the U.S. Supreme Court, those two women, one of them at the time she was confirmed, was at that time a consultant for Goldman Sachs, and the other one had previously done it. The current nominee by Barack Obama is a confirmed, dyed-in-the-wool, registered Republican, and the firm he worked for represented Goldman Sachs. And by the way, he's on the Second Circuit Court of Appeal, and he has never voted for a black man's civil rights. There have been occasions where African American prisoners have been set free or had their convictions overturned, but he's voted against it in each and every instance, and he is a high finance oriented Republican. And here we've got a Democratic president nominally who is supporting him. We've got a Democratic nominee for the upcoming presidential race who's owned by Goldman Sachs, and Cruz, Creepy Cruz, his wife, was an executive for Goldman Sachs. And we look at Bill Clinton for 5 terms as governor of Arkansas, and then U.S. president for 2 terms. That means he's a civil servant. So there is a relatively low cap on the amount of money they can make. And Hillary Clinton, I think the last few years in the law firm, didn't break $250K, if I recall their tax returns they published. So how did they get to be worth $64 million in the interim, and her get 28 million, in the last 3.5 years, since she's been a rather incompetent Secretary of State that made some of the dumbest calls I've ever seen. And then $16 million in a 12-month period from Goldman Sachs at $220 a pop for 30-minute speaking engagements. You're bought, controlled, and sold. You're sold. So we started in the Reagan administration when they started borrowing a lot of money from the People's Republic of China, trillions of dollars. We still haven't paid any interest on that. And the rich got real rich, and the middle class dropped down to being kind of poor, and it's gotten worse. And the Obama administration has been borrowing trillions of more dollars to make ends meet. And I'm worried about him. We like to think we got a black president. I say we haven't. If they ever hypothetically authorized reparations to African Americans, I would rather say Afro-American because of the cultural significance. He wouldn't be eligible because he has no African American, Afro-American, Black American ancestors. He's raised as an Indonesian, his mother's white, and his blood relatives are interesting. CNN ran a special on it. So our president is a blood relative of Dick Cheney, the right-wing clown, Brad Pitt, the actor, and Warren Buffett, the billionaire. Also, it seems that the Bushes and the Soetoros did business, at one point on an extensive basis, and the idea that Barack Obama is family friends with the Bushes is a little weird, but it seems to be the fact. When Soetoro died and left everything to Obama and his two half-siblings, he was one of the 10, 15 richest men on the planet Earth. So just take that into context. About 15 years ago, my oldest son was causing problems, so my then wife suggested I send him to a certain private school in Hawaii, and I was astonished to discover that the tuition for that high school was $95,000 a year, not including room and board. And guess what? That's the high school Barack Obama went to, and when he went there, according to a white classmate of his that I'm acquainted with, the tuition, not including room and board, was $45,000 a year.
Wow.
So that's a nice little homeboy with that kind of money in his backing. He's probably, by the way, worth quite a bit more than Donald Trump. So when we talk about Donald Trump being the rich kid, we have to consider Barack being richer. He hasn't done much of anything for African Americans. The educational setup is still horrible. He hasn't done anything to change it. There's no back to work employment bill. There's a bailout bill that the Bush administration came up with, $700 billion. Principal beneficiary now is Goldman Sachs. There's an incentive plan, $781 billion, which are the two largest appropriations in the history of the United States. And nothing's been done about high finance, investment banking, and financial banking. And what that is all about is they get to run the financial banking industry, such as Goldman Sachs, but they don't have to put their own money up. They use tax dollars, and if anything goes wrong, the government bails them out. That's the bailout bill and the incentive bill. So I thought private enterprise was you put your own money up, put it at risk, but when you put tax dollars up, that's something else. You get the profits, you get to run it, but the taxpayer's back. So nothing's been done about that, so we've been let down for 8 years, and looks like if she gets in, we got another 8 years for a 16-year run of finance ripping us off, and we're paying for them.
What about the email situation with Hillary?
Oh, that's disgusting. See, the point is government email operations and servers get hacked, but private has nowhere near the defensive ability that you have with government-run email systems. Now, see, stuff that's going through these emails is hypothetically we have word that they are going to assassinate Gaddafi next Tuesday. We think this should be tolerated and approved. So what kind of security are you thinking about for the U.S. when you allow that to go through a private server? See, when you start letting stuff that has to do with the security of the United States of America from the State Department angle, from the person at the top, and they're just putting it right out there with the rest of us, you see, that's just rather scary when you think about it. And what it is reflective of a spoiled little upper middle class girl who's used to getting her own way without having to worry about the consequences. So it's indicative of a wrongful outlook on things. I can't think of anything that she pushed as Secretary of the State that was wise. She supported that weapons of mass destruction nonsense, which was basically Halliburton, which is a Bush family enterprise, not run by Dick Cheney, but by the Bushes and the Walkers, was trying to get the contract with Hussein to exploit Iraqi oil. The Russians and the French got it. So here we come with weapons of mass destruction, which is a fabrication, and that moron sits there and goes along with it. Why? Well, I guess since Goldman Sachs financed the whole mess and they own her, she was pushing it for that. Somebody needs to question her about that. Last I heard, 8 years ago now, Halliburton was netting $2.3 million every 7 hours off of their Iraqi operations. See, George Herbert Walker, Uncle Herbie to George Herbert Walker Bush, president, and great uncle to George Walker Bush, president, founded Halliburton in 1946 in Oklahoma. It had previously been founded in 1919 in Oklahoma, but it had become defunct and he reincorporated it. So Halliburton is a Bush-Walker family enterprise. Now he helped George Herbert Walker Bush set up Zapata Oil, which was a business that bought percentages of the mineral rights from property owners who ringed certain areas that Halliburton were going to be subject to oil development. And maybe you buy 10, 15, 25% of a person's mineral rights, and then 2 years later the mineral rights start coming in because Exxon is pumping oil and Halliburton knows about it. It's illegal because it's insider information, but Bush made a fortune and he and the family chartered Zapata Offshore Oil Inc. in Kuwait. It's a holding company for the Bush family operations in addition to Halliburton. So they were broke and destitute when Hussein nationalized everything in 1991. After Gulf War I, well, Hussein got punished. Kuwait got back on its feet and the Bushes were back together financially. Now the interesting thing about Kuwait is Winston Churchill, the famous prime minister, was looking for a reliable source of oil for the British Navy because their educational level had dropped, and some clown forgot that when you shoot a heavy shell it goes out, up, and then down.
Right.
And they armored the sides of their ships, but not the deck, so they had to make up for that so nobody would find out, but they needed oil to replace coal. So this Lawrence of Arabia that was subject to a movie that's going to be a remake coming out in a few months, was sent to the Middle East to find a suitable source of oil. He found southern Iraq. So in 1922, Winston Churchill got British Parliament to charter, Anglo-Persian Oil, which is now British Petroleum. And the Royal Marines went in, cut off part of Iraq, which is now Kuwait, set up a puppet government, and the rest is history. And a lot of people are dead. Now, by the way, Lolo Soetoro did a lot of joint ventures with British Petroleum. That's Barack Obama's stepdaddy, adopted daddy. You will notice that when BP had that oil rig blowout in the Gulf and everybody said, why don't you allow the other oil companies to come in and help? And Barack Obama said, no, we're not going to require that. That's because his trust fund still doing business with BP, and that would have revealed some secrets. And meanwhile, he was playing basketball. And BBC noted, this is the 23rd day of the oil crisis in the Mexican Gulf, and it seems the American president, for the 21st day out of the 23rd, has been playing basketball with a high school youth. Interestingly enough, he's not been talking about character development, but simply playing ball. Quite fascinating. It would seem he would be able to use his time for something more constructive, considering the environmental disaster here.
Well, what about, okay, like the email server controversy with Hillary Clinton? The guy who created the server, he got immunity from prosecution.
Yeah.
So does that mean they feel like it's some criminal?
Something's wrong.
Yeah.
See, if you are entrusted to be Secretary of State,
Right.
that means the only person over you is the President of the United States when it comes to dealing with domestic policy.
Right.
Secret treaties, deals with MI5 to assassinate somebody, hiring, this group or that group of special operatives, the deals, cutthroat things that go on behind closed doors and supposed to be highly classified. You run this through a public domain server. What kind of irresponsible moron are you? And if you want to see how bad what they're talking about with this Benghazi thing, see 13th Hour.
Okay.
What happens is they've taken down Gaddafi. That was on her watch. That was her call and recommendation to Obama. And Obama now says it's one of his biggest mistakes. So you have an operation where there are 45 CIA employees operating clandestinely in Benghazi. You hire 4 private contractors through the State Department to act as security. You have a motel, a luxury motel that Gaddafi had previously operated for the benefit of Western oil interest, and you secretly, supposedly bring the American ambassador in and you put him in this motel surrounded by tall office buildings, which would be a sniper's paradise, and you have 2 security people that are private contractors protecting the American ambassador. Well, guess what? The guns are where the CIA office is, and the ammunition is where the ambassador is, and you hire some 17 through 19-year-old locals to be embassy security. Well, when the organized militia decides to move on the ambassador, whose presence is known because of some press conferences, there's some 17 through 19-year-olds who run off. There are 2 contractors there with no ammunition to feed their weapons, and they set fire to the place, killed the ambassador in the fire and another special operative type. Meanwhile, down where the CIA folk are in the State Department is running their operation, they can't get permission from the State Department to go down there and rescue the ambassador until the 4 private operatives just take it on their own initiative to go down there. It's too late. They don't get any backup. There are drones in the area, but the State Department is unavailable to intervene, so the Air Force can't use the drones. They can't fly in F-16s are only 10 minutes away at least to make a threat because the State Department has neglected it, and you're supposed to be in charge of this. It's your idea to take the man out, and you don't make any preparations and you let this disaster go down. That just says you're not fit for the office. You aren't fit based on what you did in the Senate when you went along with weapons of mass destruction. You aren't fit for what you did recommending that Gaddafi be taken out without any knowledge of or consideration for destabilizing the region. You compound it by not taking care of your business and seeing to it that the State Department that you're over has handled the security in the area. You send an ambassador in there with only 2 people to protect him, for God's sake, and you just sit there and ignore it. You don't set up lines of communication between the people on the ground, the Defense Department and the State Department. Nobody can be bothered at late at night. I guess somebody needed their beauty rest. but you know, it's a disgrace. And then you use a private server to convey top secret government information. That's just great.
So is she a war criminal or a
No, it's not war criminal. It's just you take an oath of office, you have responsibilities, and it's so backwards what you did. It's basically malfeasance in office.
That's what you imagine. This you believe that you think they will actually arrest her if they do a?
They could. In other words, there's secrets acts. In other words, you're not supposed to take any action that jeopardizes the necessary secrets of the United States. You run the State Department.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, gee, while I'm doing my hair and getting my nails done, oh, let's see, can you hand me the phone? Oh, Thomas, you know, I think we're going to have to run a little quick bombing strike and some drones on some interest in Iran. You know, maybe we can get away with it, and everybody in hell's listening to it. That's what the problem is.
Right.
And by the way it works is if you're on voice transmission on a cell phone, it's not so secure. Email's been out there so long, that's just like, come on in and take a look at what I just sent. The only secure way to do it actually would be to do text functions on a cell phone, or use your State Department secure lines, for God's sake. You just do what the rest of us do with everybody getting their email hacked, you know, and viruses and malware and everything coming in, and that's how you transmit State Department secrets?
Wow.
What kind of fool are you?
So she's not really fit to run the country. She's not.
No, she's got a reputation out of Arkansas of having a bad temper problem that she can't control.
Wow. Wow. So, I mean, the other choice will be Trump, or is it going to be a suspended election?
Well, I don't mean it's a suspended election. The thing about Trump is I think he talks trash, but at least he's financing his own campaign. And he doesn't particularly like Goldman Sachs at all either, because he's one of these entrepreneurs that actually builds something, sells it or rents it, and he's got to get financing through Goldman Sachs. He doesn't particularly like that situation. He pays for it. Bernie Sanders is worth $700,000, he and his wife. He hasn't jumped up from, that's where Hillary and Bill were, to being worth $64 million, you know what I'm saying, in 4 or 5 years because of being bought off. You know, Bill was a necessary president. He would have been a good one, but he should have told everybody to get screwed and let Larry Flynt handle it.
I mean, it's crazy, like the Dennis Hastert guy who was leading the charge in the House. The stuff he's in now, I mean, they say he's a serial child molester. He only got 15 months.
He got all that sickness, and by the way, it's their right to do it, but Hillary and a whole lot of the Democratic Party hierarchy, Cruz and Rubio, I mean, they're on the gay side, so it's all right if they want to do it, but I mean, at least tell us so we know what we're doing when you start running the LGBT thing is the main point. Obama's too, from what he's done with his executive orders. The rest of us feel kind of left out, but it's your business. You got a right to do whatever you want to do. More power to you if you take over the political
So you saying like
arena.
there's actually like I could say like a gay mafia that's running.
Not gay mafia. It's just they've organized with Hollywood to run the main propaganda engine for the world, and they brought it up. It would have been nice if African Americans had had that advantage.
So what you say, like the political leadership of this country, most of them are
they favor it.
They favor
not
that.
all of them,
Okay.
but a lot of them.
The LGBTQ stuff.
Well, that questioning part.
The questioning part.
See,
But it is a gay agenda though.
Well, yeah, but see, it's like going to school, for example, in California. When I was out there 3 or 4 weeks ago, some parents showed me some flyers that are sent home with them. They're telling the parents, don't try to tell your son to be a man or tell your daughter to be a lady, because you should not try to influence their gender orientation. That should be up to them. So I don't buy that. You tell your boy act like a man, but they want you not to tell your boy child that and let him make up his mind what he wants to do. You see, it's homosexuality, and they talk about sexuality to second, third, fourth grade kids who don't even know what heterosexuality is. See, it's kind of weird. So it's like, leave that to the home. If you want to teach a kid that, let it do it, but you can't teach sex education in schools to straight kids, or straight sex education, but you can teach homosexuality. I don't think that's quite right. You know, whatever you want to do is fine. But see, the thing that I don't particularly appreciate is what I saw at the Paradiso 2 weeks ago. I went in there to see a movie. It was Criminal. It was a pretty good movie.
Okay.
And then I decided to see Superman versus Batman again. Kind of an interesting theme. So I'm into the theater early. And right before they got ready to run the trailers, they were running these public service announcements. So they had one that they had flashed on the screen. It said manhood, huge capital letters. I said, okay. Then it said duty, honor, courage, bravery, forthrightness, integrity, accountability. I said, yeah. And then it said not. And then it started taking the words down. You don't have to be this anymore. And they took down integrity, accountability, responsibility, you know, courage, bravery. They said you can be anything you want to be. It's what you want to be. This is the new way of things. I said, I'll be damned. You see in what they do now, like in an action adventure stuff that they got the guys watching, young kids, the protagonists kiss each other, they pat each other on the butt, they tease, I don't play that butt, you know, and, you know, they got all of this dialogue going, and it's just, they take black actors who are good actors who started their careers doing action and adventure and stuff like that, and they make them into slapstick comedy type. So the actors are good, but you take Ice Cube and the rest of them and you do Barbershop 2 with Amos and Andy. You take the Wyandotte brothers, and they've always been kind of suspect. They like to dress up like girls a lot, you know.
The Wayans, yeah.
And then you take, what is it, Black, and, you know, whatever that thing is, so it's Step and Fetch It, you know, and it's like...
Oh, Blackish?
Black. Yeah. That's the series, isn't it? With Diana Ross's daughter.
Yeah.
I don't watch it. Some things I don't watch. I was at the movies last night and I saw Captain America.
Civil War.
Civil War. And actually I'd side with Captain America, and in there they noted that probably the Hulk would too. Tony, interesting.
Iron Man, yeah.
Tony Stark. Now, Tony Stark's is an interesting character. I like him. But atypically, he didn't think it through like he usually does. And the actor that plays Tony Stark has an interesting history in the media.
Robert Downey Jr., yes.
Yeah. Downey, when he was a young guy in his late teens, played a homosexual prostitute real well in this movie where he had a cocaine problem.
Less Than Zero, was that it?
I don't remember what it was, but you know, you never can tell. See, actors can be superheroes, Iron Man, or they can be gay prostitutes, whatever that was back then. And you can't tell, they can be convincing. You see, that's what happened with Bill Cosby. See, Bill Cosby and myself were basically the only two people in television with stature who were straight black men. Now, there are other straight black men in Hollywood, but they tend to read scripts, and there are a few others weren't of that stature. But you see, throughout American history, when you want to destroy a black man, what you do is you accuse him of some kind of sexual activity. Typically, you want to get rid of a black man, you accuse him of rape.
Right.
So I don't know.
You just said it, but what do you think about, you look at the show Empire on TV?
Oh, that just got to be, one or two episodes, okay, but fine, they switched it over into a gay showcase. What is that? Athlete turned transvestite and tranny.
Oh, you talking about Caitlyn Jenner or Bruce Jenner?
Yeah, the ratings on that are below the basement now, but I mean, people watching it at first because they're curious. I mean, see, that's just pushing it. It's like you look at the Housewives series and they have degraded women so badly with that, and you look at the people that produce it, and they've got a right, they have a right to be whatever they want to be, but they're flamers.
Right.
And it strikes me they're just degrading women and womanhood by doing what they're doing, like Housewives of Atlanta. You got, what, 11 or 12 of them in there, and only 2 of them are married, 3 of them out of the 11 or 12. How you get Housewives out of that? You see, this push where you destroy the family, you know, is it Janet Jackson at 50? Is she going to be a mother out of wedlock? Why do you push that? It's a negative imagery to American young women. See, the State Department, we want to get into government functions. The Defense Department wrote these white papers in 2011. They were worried about the defense posture of the United States. They said, if you take all the ethnicities and races, this includes whites, Chicanos, Asians, blacks, it says 42% of Americans 35 and under are illegitimate. 42%. If you take the Americans 35 and under who were born in the 50 largest cities in America, 75% of them are illegitimate, and if you take the 50 largest cities, those who were born there 35 and under, 80-some% are illegitimate. So what are you doing to the country with the thing about the institution of marriage? Now see, the LGBT community got a wise move for political strategy by casting it as a constitutional freedom versus religion thing. But you see, the People's Republic of China, the largest country on the planet, is definitely officially atheistic, and they approve marriage. And marriage between men and women is a cultural artifact that embodies in lockstep with physiological, biological evolution of humankind in terms of its child rearing strategies, its breeding and child rearing strategies. Marriage is an ancient cultural institution, not religious institution, that reinforces that. If you get chimpanzees, they've got a way to breed and raise their young, and their culture reinforces that. Gorillas, orangutans, orcas, porpoises, dolphins, sperm whales, you know, they've got elephants, you know, they've got wolves. They've got a culture that reinforces their biological breeding patterns. You know, we think, so I guess we can get away with it, but that's a problem. That's why you get all these crazy folk shooting up a schoolyard.
Right.
You try to hide the apex predator that's inside humans from the boys so they grow up nice and emotional, which doesn't work when they grow up to be potentially dangerous apex predators, if they don't get in touch with that inner beast and get very familiar with it, it doesn't go away, it just jumps out. When it's unexpected and they shoot up a schoolyard and they go crazy. See, so we've got a lot of things that we want to do that really don't match what we're all about. There's nothing to be ashamed of what you are. I mean, I'm a master diver. I do scuba. I've been doing it for 50 years.
Wow.
I've been in the water with sharks on more than one occasion. I want to do a cage dive off the Fralin Islands with the world's largest great whites. I was even in the water years and years ago with a great white. It wasn't any cage, it wasn't intentional. I've been in the water with a 16, 17 foot long, very large tiger shark on purpose with no cage. Done shark dives, but dangerous as they are, they're in danger of being extinct because of our predation. Elephants are in danger of extinction. They're on the endangered list because we are the apex predator. Grizzly bears, polar bears, lions, tigers, they are fearsome, but we are the foremost predator on the planet. We're at the top of the food chain. That says something about some entity that can do that. We kill better than anything on the planet, individually and collectively. So you can't get that out of us. That's how we got where we are. And if I'm sorry if the last 50 years on the planet have seen some people that don't want to acknowledge that, it doesn't go away. You know, when I grew up, one of the main things about becoming a man was learning how to deal with a bully. Something was wrong with you if you couldn't stand up for a fist fight, even if you got your butt beat. You were expected to fight, take your knocks, bloody lips, split lips, bloody noses, black eyes, bruises, and contusions. And we fought it out man to man. The bullies got taken down and shown the error of their ways. You see it in this movie, Back to the Future, with McFly. He's a bullied man, he's mistreated, pushed around. His son goes back in time, finds him, schools him. Dad knocks the would-be bully out. And when the kid comes back to the future, the bully works for Dad.
Right.
He's his flunky. See, that's human nature. But nowadays, you want to send a second grader to juvenile court because he and another second grader had a fight. You want to punk these boys out, and you know, you got to call the police, you got to call not a parent, the parents, and the school system is supposed to protect the kids from bullying. The kids are supposed to protect themselves. You know, part of my maturation and movement from boy to manhood is standing up to a bully or two or three or four. Knocking somebody flat or getting a black eye. You just had to do it. It's the way people work. But you see, we've let our inner cities become matriarchies. There's no manhood in the neighborhood.
Wow.
And the boys don't fight. They want to pop a cap on somebody for looking at them cross-eyed. Because that is the counterpart of looking at an unruly female throw battery acid on a neighbor because of an imagined slight 6 months before. See, that's what that is. You don't have the balls to stand up and punch it out somebody toe to toe. You go do a drive-by and you're not even at war with somebody. It's like if you talk to Armenian mafia types, real mafia types, you talk to members of tongs, they protect the women, children, the neighborhood, the old people. The pensions get paid out. They may have war with each other, but they tend to look at each other as soldiers, but they're civilians. You don't mess with the civilians because you serve something for the civilians. There's a restaurant I go to in the New York area. It's been open for a long time. They used to use it as a set for The Sopranos. It's run by the real live folk, and they got the pins on. And little old ladies wear real bling and ankle-length fur coats. Nobody locks the cars. The limos come up. Nobody's got to escort anybody to the front door. Why? They don't allow criminality in the community. But you see, we got to go rob our neighbors, jack up the babies, pimp the girls. They don't pimp their own women, you know. They don't sell drugs in the neighborhoods. We do. So we just do take down self-defeating stuff because we have no manhood in the neighborhood. We used to.
Let me ask you about this. I know last year it was Confederate flags. It's like this year is restrooms. What's your take on the restroom situation?
You know what? If they're going to do this, go all the way. Just make them co-ed like they do some places in Europe. But, you know, it does bother me about, you see, you either make it all the way live and just say it's a restroom.
Right.
And you deal with the social modifications. See, you go to Europe and you go to a European beach, every woman from 2 years girl from 2 years old to 75 years old does not have on a top. And they walk around the townships that are beach communities topless. Nobody blinks. You go to Scandinavia, lunchtime people come out of the office building, stretch out their blankets, open up their picnic baskets, get naked and sunbathe. Nobody blinks. That's not America. We got this puritanical thing in us. Get rid of that and, you know, you're going to have unisex bathrooms, no problem. But you see, you have a downside. Out in L.A. a couple of years ago where they'd had it for a while, well, the young 15, 16-year-old lesbian wanted to use the boys' room. She had been doing it, so some gangbangers just barred the door and they gang raped her. Wow. Basically told her, if you don't want your stuff, we do. But you see, again, Mother Nature. So you got that problem. See, there's some downsides to it and nobody wants to take any consideration for it. You got gay marriage and the criteria is love, not reproduction anymore. What happens if two gay siblings decide they want to get married? Since they can't reproduce, does the incest taboo still kick in? Or, you see, if you let that happen, what happens if a mother and a daughter decide they want to get married and be gay lovers? Is that okay? There was a thing, whether or not it's true, kicked around on the net for a while. The mother was talking about she waited till her daughter got 18 before they became lovers. Well, if you do that, you got an equal protection argument. But if you have two siblings who are opposite sex, they say we'll get sterilized, but we want to be lovers and get married. Is it legal for us?
Wow.
You see, so you open up a Pandora's box. Where do you start? Okay, they got that round, but what happens next?
So is this like a form of genocide or population control?
It's just, it's what is going on to a great extent, not just with that, but with other things. You have a right, but because you have a right does not mean you should exercise it, because sometimes exercise of a right becomes license. In other words, you've got a First Amendment right to free speech, but you get up in an assembly where there are old people around there, and you start cussing and MFing and all the rest of this. Well, you've got a right under the First Amendment to do it, but it's very rude, and that becomes license. You see, you have a right to be a coward, but being a coward is a filthy thing to be. I ask people this question. I say, what happens if we drop back a couple of thousand years, let's say hypothetically, and it's you, and you're coming back from a hunting trip. You've got an antelope, a deer across your shoulders. You're going to feed your people. And as you draw near to your village, whether it's an Indian village with teepees, it's in the savannah, it's Africa, or it's in Europe in a deep forest, and you're in Germany, and you see a war party from a rival tribe getting ready to fall on your village, do you turn around and run since nobody's looking and save yourself? Do you risk your life and sound the alarm? Do you sound the alarm and attack to give your village a chance to react and probably lose your life? What do you do? And a lot of people nowadays will tell me, well, you run, nobody's looking. Say, but there are no witnesses. Who would know? Well, the most important witness in the world knows, you. You see, so it's like those kind of things, you know, are expected as part of the social compact. It's called altruism, sacrificing yourself for the good of the many. But nowadays, it's like, just do your thing. Don't worry about anybody else but you. See, and that doesn't bode well.
I want to ask you this too. You said witness. I'm about to segue into this witness thing, because we know that Billy Cowles, he passed away on April 26th of this year, and he was known as the witness because he was on that balcony when King got shot. But you know, a lot of people think
no, he wasn't. He was out there and he went back in.
So my thing is, like, people are kind of like questioning his place in that whole scenario. Some people believe that he was in on Dr. King being assassinated. What's your take on Billy Cowles?
We have this concern with been interviewing a lot of witnesses over the years after I got off the case and got off the bench. That was 16 years ago. So we've collected sworn affidavits, some sworn depositions. It's on tape, and we will be releasing something. So stay tuned.
Okay,
I will mention something about it in a book I'm coming out with.
Oh wow! I heard some things where I talked to Dick Gregory. He told me some things as well, and also it's been floating down the internet where he was on tape, kind of incriminating himself, say he got the way so he get a clear shot, type of thing. Have you heard that clip?
Yes.
So you think
I know most of the people who were on that balcony personally. Some have said, let sleeping dogs lie. Some have said, we need to get to the bottom of it.
So when you want the people that say, let's get to the bottom of it?
No, I'm talking about the people who were out there.
Oh, out there, right.
When I've told them what we've come up with, we need to get to the bottom of this. Others have said, let sleeping dogs lie.
I keep on thinking like this. You know how they did Ernest Withers, like how the commercial pill and all this media and people was praising him. Then the commercial pill came out with a report a couple years later after he passed away, saying that he was an informant.
They're trying to badmouth him. See, actually, it's caught up with this fraternity thing. You know, the black frats started off not as a party thing, but as a disguise for a fight against apartheid or segregation. You had, for example, Emmett Till's situation. You had some alphas. A.W. Willis, Russell Sugarman, now Judge Sugarman, retired. You had some collaborators, one of whom was Old Man Withers, who took the photographs of Till's body. And Sugarman and Willis, who were alphas, along with some others, smuggled the photographs out of Mississippi and got them to Illinois' governor, who exercised his executive privilege to demand that the body of the Illinois resident be returned so everybody saw it. There were a number of cars shot up and destroyed. People got wounded in this. So see, Withers was always right there trying to do the right thing. So you have to deal with the commercial appeal. The commercial appeal is really owned through family enterprises by Kathleen Harris. Her son is Terry Harris, former U.S. attorney, now chief counsel for FedEx. Larry Brown is retired. He had that position. He's an old friend of mine. But anyway, see, they are friends with were friends with Kenneth Turner and all the Republican hierarchy. So they once ran the Press Scimitar, which was a lousy newspaper, just totally biased, and they ran news articles as an excuse to editorialize. Well, they were going bankrupt. So what happens is Harris and Company bought the Commercial Appeal. As soon as they bought the Commercial Appeal, they fired all the editorial staff and replaced the high editors with the Press Scimitar editors. So they've been using it. It's a lousy newspaper now, though they have some decent folk that work on it. But it's a piss poor example of newspaper work. It's back to the old Hearst tradition of yellow journalism. Hearst, for example, wanted a war with Spain so America could get into imperialism, so he hyped that thing up about they destroyed the Maine, the battleship. Turns out that about 25 years after the fact, when it had more problems, what the U.S. Navy found out was the Maine burned coal. They used coal as partial armor, and they had it next to the magazines. Well, the type of cheap coal they were using will spontaneously ignite when it gets under pressure and it gets hot, and it will start burning. So the coal started burning, set off the black powder magazines, blew the ship up. It wasn't a bomb, it wasn't sabotage. But Randolph Hearst wanted a war with Spain, so he started hyping that. That's classic yellow journalism. They used to print it on yellow paper for the comic section that they had.
Wow.
So you see, the Commercial Appeal also owns Channel 3, owns Channel 5, partly, and you see there is this cable in the area to control what news you get. 13 is Fox, 24 is what it is, and 30 is what it is. But you see, here's where you get into the real problem. These political ads these days, the time before last I ran for an office was in 1998, and I held a record. I was the only person in the history of Shelby County to win every single precinct in a contested election.
Wow.
And my opponent was Harris's son, Terry Harris. So they were pushing Terry Harris for the last week in the Commercial Appeal and bad-mouthing me, but I got 72% of the vote. But what I did not realize as I'd been gone from this area, and it's small enough for you to see it, I didn't do any ads until late because I was relying upon my already established community contacts. But what I did discover is the way the game now works in commercial television and in politics is you take out ads with a TV station so they don't badmouth you in favor of the person that's giving them the ads. If both candidates advertise on the same station, they play it evenly. If one of them advertises more than the other, then they'll badmouth the one that doesn't.
Wow.
So it's a form of, it's a corruption that's going on. And by the way, I actually won the election. Again, I got about 70% of the vote. But they've got these deballed voting machines that are corrupted. They've been hacked into. And all it takes to control an election is an iPhone, an Apple, an Android, iPad, or a tablet. And you don't have to have a code because there is no firewall, there is no security code. It's based on Windows 2000, and they don't even use the deballed programming. They use something that some guy down in Arkansas came up with, and it's never been tested or verified as per the state law. And the secret to this thing is that the candidates' names are not actually in the voting machines. There is a candidate number. So maybe there are only 2 candidates for the office, but there's 7 numbers in there. So with the phone, all you have to do is draft a text, and when you get within 5 to 10 feet of one of the machines, you just press send. You send a text to a third party, but the machine picks it up through the card reading slot. And it corrupts that machine. Within 10 minutes, every machine in the precinct, and within an hour, every machine in the system. And it comes up with what you call a differential vote count. So you program what percentage of the vote you want your candidate to have. So if you get into it, you might find that there are votes that go to other candidates in there, not other candidates, other candidate numbers. And when they kick the number out, the computer setup has kicked that around until you get an accurate count for the number of votes that went in. So the crime about that is, and talking about corruption, is since 1968, the money has been on accounts from federal drug seizures from the feds to replace the deballed machines without cost to the county. All it takes is a simple majority resolution by the county commission. We, the below-signed county commissioners, hereby resolve that the deballed machines should be replaced, period. Sign off. That's all it takes. But for the last 8 years, at least 3 black Democrats who are different because they have term limitations have voted against that. The Democratic Party Central Committee has not called them on the carpet for why. There was money embezzled from the Democratic Party. They're trying to put $20,000 worth of blame on Brian Carson, but there are other people who had it. And one of the schemes is a fundraiser that I was the MC for back in November 2013 at a country club. So the Democratic Party buys tens of thousands of dollars worth of tablecloths, china, tableware, serving utensils from the country club. What are they going to need it for? Well, the person that took care of that sold it back to the country club, and he got a check, but the check did not go back into the Democratic Party treasury. And from November 2013, when there was $150,000 in there, by July 2014, before the election, there wasn't $300 left in there.
Wow, that's crazy.
And then somebody seems to have taken some of the money and put on picnics to introduce white Republicans to the black community. Now his daughter gets financial assistance from financial entities that heretofore have not dealt with black entrepreneurs. And let's say this individual runs some child care facilities that supposedly have been cleared by the county ethics committee, which actually has no power other than making recommendations that land on the desk of Amy Wyrick, the DA. So that office is completely corrupt. I've never seen anything like it. There are at least 11 cases where an appellate court has called her to the account for prosecutorial misconduct, and nothing's been done until recently when it hit the paper she was disciplined by the Supreme Court, and so she wants to appeal that. But it's corruption and rampant, and what is going on is that by 2040, well, within the lifetimes of a lot of youth today who will be mature by then, the United States will no longer be a majority white country. So Memphis, for example, only 19.1% of the registered voters in Memphis are white. Less than 25% of the registered voters in the county are white, but they run it. So I guess they're practicing by use of the house Negroes and the compromised Negroes and the Negroes who put a whole bunch of, have a whole bunch of them in one race and one white candidate so they can run the politics. What the politics is all about is economic control. There are 7 things where the old money is in Memphis: real estate acquisition, real estate management, real estate development, construction, supply of construction materials, transportation, and distribution of goods. And they control it. And the city council goes along with it, grants zoning variances and everything else. City council appropriates taxpayers' money to build things, to make things, and then turn it over to private enterprise to run, supposedly for the good of the many, but it looks like to me for the good of the few. In other words, private enterprise is about putting your own money up, not tax dollars up, and then you either make it or you break it. So that's $35 million for Beale Street Landing, where it was supposed to be a bar and grill, but the city can't run it. And the business that it was set up for the benefit of bailed, so now they got a white elephant with a big catfish jungle gym. $28 million to this airline that never even incorporated. $7.2 million to a New York firm to look at these rape kits that TBI said they do for free, and have been down here often to get it done. Why don't they want it done locally? Because certain protected people will be exposed for their pedophilia and illegal, unlawful behavior. Like that whole thing with Nora Jackson, the DA's office tried to conceal that there was a rape crisis kit evaluated, and it showed that there was a DNA sample, sperm, left in the vagina of the deceased victim within a couple of hours of her demise, and it was left by a United Methodist preacher up in Jackson, Tennessee, that his DNA was all over the house. So there is the little matter of Nora Jackson's father being gunned down in a hail of bullets near a police precinct where nobody heard the gunshots. That's still unsolved. And a few millions of dollars worth of money that has seemingly gone strange places that should have wound up with her, including an insurance policy split by an aunt and uncle. There's a situation where a certain Southern Baptist minister who's family friends with the DA, who left tapes of himself sodomizing these 9 through 12-year-old boys, and it made a thing with the state DA's newspaper. And what happens is this person got put on 10 years of probation, is not on a sexual offenders list. This is not the first time he's done it, and a slap on the wrist. And the church decided that it was going to give these boys fellowships or scholarships to go to college when they got old enough. See, somebody's supposed to be doing some long time consecutively in the state penitentiary for that. But, you know, I had a case where they tried to wire this DA when she was an assistant, tried to transfer it out of Division 5 from Judge Daly's court, tried to bamboozle me, and I insisted and wound up demanding that I be told how what the drugs were. 4.5 kilos of coke, crystal meth, LSD, all sorts of drugs, enough to get several life sentences in a federal system, or multiple 60-year sentences in the state system, and they wanted the perpetrator to get 1 year upfront probation, judicial diversion with no hearing, and his rich female young girl co-defendant to have the charges dropped and her record expunged. Metro Narco got really upset because they'd been working on this case for a long time. That's been 20-some years ago. But see, there's corruption that's rampant.
Yeah, so it makes sense. You look at that, what happened almost 50 years ago at the Lorraine Motel, that people was able to do that here in Memphis.
Oh, yeah, look, Edgar Hoover got killed, 4 civil rights workers got buried in the levee, and Emmett Till was lynched. And by the way, interesting what the FBI did to solve that case. Remember, Hoover is anti-civil rights, but he doesn't like the Klan. What happened is they made a deal up with the non-existent entity popularly known as the Mafia. So they had a Mafia enforcer come down and visit the Klan suspects, and he jacked some up and got one of them to write out a 4-page handwritten confession to the whole thing and where the bodies were. So interesting what they can do when they put their minds to it.
Wow.
But you see, and that's because Hoover's parents were accused of passing for white, being black.
But did Hoover have something to do with the death of Dr. King, in your estimation?
Oh, yes. See, for years, King had been subject to 24/7 audio and visual surveillance. 48 hours before he was killed, on the direct order of J. Edgar Hoover, they called it off. The weapon he got shot with was inventoried to the FBI in late December 1967. It was an XM21. It was a converted M14 with a stainless steel barrel, 63 of which were manufactured by the Army Marksmanship Unit. It had a rate of rifling twist of 1 turn in every 11¼ inches. 7.62 fired special subsonic ammunition. It had a psionic suppressor on the barrel with a 3 to 9 power red field telescope modified by a company known as Leatherwood. The FBI inventoried 5 of them in late December 1967. The rest of the Defense Department apparatus objected vehemently because they wanted them for the Navy, Marines, and Army for the Vietnam setup. And then 2 months after the King assassination, on an inventory, the FBI reports one of them as destroyed, damaged, or missing. So they only had 4 instead of the 5. It was left at the firehouse. The shot was taken from the firehouse dormitory cafeteria on the 2nd floor. The window was slightly open. They made the shot from a fixed cafeteria table or table in the dormitory. It didn't come from the flop house. It didn't come from the bushes. Captain Tommy Smith gave us an affidavit and permission from his widow to use the video, where he says he's the first detective on the scene 15 minutes after King shot. He's directed to the bathroom for the flop house. Why, he still hasn't been able to determine, or at least before he died. Said when he got there, there's a limb, he indicates, this wide, going diagonally through the window. You couldn't even see the Lorraine Motel. In a deck that the DA's office says is where Ray rested his rifle on. Well, Smith says, no, that's not what happened. He also clued us in on the fact that, believe it or not, it was Memphis Police Department's conclusion that Ray was not the gunman. After looking at all of it, it was also mine. The FBI took the death slug and they stripped the jacket off and split the core into 4 pieces and claimed that you couldn't analyze the bullet, and then they fired the samples from Ray's rifle, a 30-06 Remington 760 Game Master. It was a pump, not a bolt action, that had never been sighted in, that did not hit where the scope was looking, and they claimed that they couldn't make a direct identification. But I had the ballistic material analyzed using scanning electron microscopy, and it excluded Ray's rifle, which had a rifling twist of 1 turn every 10 inches, not 1 turn every 11¼ So, in a peculiar manufacturing flaw that is not apparent on the death slug. It's interesting. See, the subsonic ammunition slows the bullet down so it doesn't leave this supersonic crack. If you've ever been shot at by a rifle bullet, when it goes past you, it goes crack. And you can hear the cracks as it passes trees. Crack, 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 crack. And you can trace it back. So you slow it down below the speed of sound. That's below about 1,100 feet per second instead of 2,500 feet per second. doesn't leave that crack. There's also something else. Energy equals mass times velocity squared. 150 to 162 grain bullet traveling at 25 to 2,700 feet per second has about 2,800, 2,500 foot-pounds of energy. That same bullet moving at 1,150 feet per second has 400 some pounds,
wow.
a whole lot less. So they take a headshot. If they had had a full velocity 30 caliber bullet, expanding bullet like this one was that they pulled out of his body, and you shot him anywhere in the torso from the range that it is from where he was standing to the fire station, it's non-survivable even if you're standing right next to the emergency room door. If it's a solid torso hit, what they do is they take a headshot, they almost miss, hits King in the right upper cheek bone, goes through, takes out molars, ruins his tongue, comes out between his lower jaws, exits the body, hits the clavicle, ricochets under the skin, over the shoulder, across the right scapula, going from right to left down, and winds up between the back skin and the left scapula. It never penetrates the thorax. It nicks the carotid artery, and that's what kills him. He bleeds out.
Wow.
He had it not done that, nicked the carotid, he would have survived. He wouldn't have been able to talk well. He would have been hurting, but that's what killed him. There's also an interesting cop who's off duty, runs up, you can see him in the video or the tape film. He's bending over King's body. He interestingly becomes the first full-fledged CIA agent in the agency's history. Within a couple of months, he'd been off duty and he was a new cop.
Yeah, you know, Morel McCullough.
Yeah.
I talked to him for a couple minutes on the phone.
Yeah.
I found his phone number online. It was like he had a South Carolina area code. And he confirmed who he was, but when I about the CIA thing, he said I can't do the interviews. But he confirmed that was him that day. And I taped it. It was fun. It was last year. Yeah. That's fascinating. Cause he was undercover too, right? He was in Memphis Invaders.
Also, you got a squad set up to protect King. They got ordered to leave and come to a meeting downtown because the police department received threats on their lives. And then there was one brother that stayed. I can't think of his name.
Ed Reddick.
Reddick.
But he was at the firehouse. They said it was hit on his life. They took him out the firehouse.
Yeah, well, see, he tells more story, interesting story when you really talk to him. He wouldn't leave. So all that stuff about going over to Kyle's house for dinner and the wife saying it's not ready. She says it was ready. She was getting calls, we can't come. Well, the timeline goes.
You talking about Kyle's wife said they were getting calls that they couldn't come to the house?
Yeah.
So the dinner was already ready before 6.
She's complaining. She died dead, but she gave an affidavit. She said she was complaining about it's getting cold and hard. I'm getting upset. So anyway, there's one brother at the fire station. He got told his kid got hurt in an accident. Better go check on it. He checks on the kids in school. Nothing happened. He calls up, I'll be back. Said, don't worry about it. Take the day off. So then that's the first delay. Second delay is when these cops wouldn't leave until they got ordered to leave on pain of discipline. So then, okay, it's on. Third delay comes when Reddick won't leave. Reddick also says what happens is they send 10 cops down in 2 squad cars. They handcuff him and hog tie his feet with a rope. And they manhandle him into the back of the squad car and they physically remove Reddick.
Wow. So basically,
Reddick. Yeah. So that's the other story. See, they got a nicer story for publication.
I see. Wow.
They even, one of the Withers kids did a little documentary and they tell that other story with him, but we got another statement from him. See, so anyway, all kinds of stuff going wrong. So what it looks like is the weapon was inventoried to the FBI that was used. it was official people acting in a maverick fashion, but J. Edgar knew about it. We also got memoranda that were obtained under the Freedom of Information Act from the FBI and other entities. And the discussion is would King be more dangerous as a dead martyr or alive to revitalize the labor movement and galvanize the anti-war movement? See, at that time, that's right before you get that little thing in Vietnam, 1968, with Vietnamese New Year, when the objective of the Vietnamese was not to hold the cities, it was to simply show the American public they'd been lied to about everything being under control in Vietnam.
Well, actually, I want to ask you about this. This is something that I know a lot of people are asking you about, the PrINce situation with PrINce, like how he died and also the will, the legal stuff. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, he's supposed to have an illegitimate son that he acknowledged. If the acknowledgement is satisfactory, basically the kid will get everything. He's got a sister, apparently, that's interesting. There doesn't seem to be a will, but really it would pass by intestate succession, and if there is a firm establishment of the paternity of this boy, then there really wouldn't be too much confusion. Otherwise, if you can't establish the paternity and the sister can't make a claim, it will do what they call escheat to the state, and the state that he resided in, or where most of the property is located, would get it.
Wow. So you believe that a person like him who was so business savvy and fought for his masters this 2 years ago would not leave a will? You think that sounds correct?
It can creep up on you. It's just one of those things people don't think about. All of us can be guilty of that.
Right.
Have one and it's out of date, or forget to change beneficiaries after you've been divorced and get remarried, that kind of thing. So it depends on what you're paying attention to. If you're all about life and not thinking about death, then it'll sneak up on you. He was just in his 50s. Crazy. I liked his music. He was outside the envelope, and he was one of the few artists, non-female artists, who didn't fit into this thing of, you can't tell whether they made it 2 weeks ago, 2 years ago, or 20 years ago. Which, by the way, is part of the stagnation of, say, the rap industry. Because of the lack of masculine imagery around the industrialized world. They like gangster hip-hop rap video all over the world. And in some places, like in Japan and Australia, they don't dance too well. So once they get it down, they kind of like it. So the people that finance rap kind of don't want it changed because there's that international market. I mean, I've been in Sydney, Australia, and somebody pull up in a Toyota, get out, 4 kids, one of them black, he got flat brim, had it a gangsta angle, sag, bagged, and dragged. And he said, man, some crazy American rented a Toyota for his kids, a kid. And one of them says, hey, Tommy Mike, tell Alan and Susan to meet us at the Club for Foster's, hey? You know, or in Beverly Hills, 90210, they've got rich white kids with multimillionaire daddies running around sag, bagged, and dragged trying to play gangster. Italy, seen it in Italy. So it's all over the world. But PrINce was one of those who didn't sound like it was old. And see, I'm mad at the youth. They've been very uncreative. When I was late teens, early 20s, the old folk didn't understand our dances, and they never heard of the music we were playing. But now you go to a function, everybody from 17 to 77 is doing the same dance to the same music, or some variation of it that looks like it. You know, reggae's the one creative thing, and then they get into that crazy reggae where they try to emulate American rap. I don't like that too much, but reggae is creative and they've got a message in it. I like the female singers, they tend to have message, and you get a mental image of a beautiful woman, and it's nice. And you know, these guys, they like to act like they're sucking on the mic, and it reminds me of, oh boy, we going there. They all sound alike, and they're all whining about something. They talking about their B's and H's and how they working their ladies and all of that, and glorification of dysfunction. A lot of the women don't like the rap video because they think it is trying to be a sexual fantasy of male dominance. Well, I don't have any problem with male dominance. It sounds right to me. But that's not what you're looking at. That's Eldridge. That's not Eldridge. That's June Cleaver. The half-naked women are these. If the boy has street cred, that's his mama, grandmama, and favorite aunts half-naked, bouncing around like that. They might not look as good, but that's the way they dress. It used to amaze me on the show when I had that. We were doing binding arbitration, so we'd have litigants and witnesses send ID pictures, and you'd get these women would send you a picture with hoochie mama shorts on, little halters with a 40-ounce in one hand, cigarette in the other, and they show up with their boys 16, 17 years old, and that's the imagery these boys have. Women don't have jobs, they're trying to find somebody with a job to hustle and then give it away to somebody that doesn't have a job. They're thug.
Wow.
Take care of your thug. I used to tour around the country. You'd get to radio station WFOL. This is Bobby on WFOL. This is Take Care of Your Thug Week. If you have a thug at home, call Bobby and let me know. Talking about we got a caller. Tamika, you got you a thug at home? Is this you, Bobby? This Bobby, Tamika. Am I on the radio? You on the radio, Tamika. Yeah, I got me a thug. He's so fine, he look like Denzel. All my friend girls, they J. Tamika, you let him work? No, Bobby, I want him home to be all smooth for me so he can chill me out when I get off my J.O.B. I don't let him work. We got another caller, Lucille. Hi, Bobby, this here Lucille. I'm white, but I likes me some thug too. They so excited. You see, yeah. And then I was sitting in a lounge in Detroit's airport. A friend of mine now, we were on business. It was an Ebony magazine, and this black female PhD had written this article. Sisters, you gotta get you a thug. They're so exciting. But since you're paying the tab, you know, it's all your shot. It's all a fantasy. You can have raw masculinity without having to put up with the downside. Sick. But then Roger King World, he discovered Oprah and Phil. And at one point, CBS or Paramount had brought him in to manage me, Judy, Oprah, and Phil. So he asked me to do him the favor of sitting at a table at a banquet in Manhattan next to his two daughters. Well, one of them was married. She's okay, but she's plain. One of them was just flat, drop dead gorgeous. And she had finished her master's degree. And, you know, I mean, she had a trust fund in this life. If she never wanted to work in life, she still couldn't spend it, but she was trying to work on a PhD. So she said, Dad said, talk to you. I said, okay, go ahead. I said, what is it? So we got to talking, and she got candid about it. She said, what's the problem? She said, I can't find an eligible bachelor. All these boys I date, it's like my girlfriends with dicks. What's going on? Can't I find a real man? So I broke it down to her about how back in the late 60s is an anti-war thing. The feminists said war is a man thing. those white guys who couldn't make it in the white man's world chimed in, and the gay crowd jumped on it. They said war is a man thing, so the way to stop war is to change the way you raise boys to men. They should be raised like the girls, and the girls had a mantra. Men need to learn to express themselves, to emote, to cry, to shout, to let it all hang out instead of trying to be so uptight and under self-control. Well, you take a boy, raise him to be a man without being under self-control. That's dangerous. We touched on that earlier.
Right.
But unisex child rearing, no war toys, cap guns, anything like that. And they basically got to raising girls. There's no yin-yang principle there. And the women today can't find a man, and the young girls can't find a man, and you have this deplorable situation where for the last decade and a half, on average, only 28% of America's high school graduates every year are male. 72% are female. 68% of the undergrads in America are female. 64% of the grad students are female. You see what happened to the boys? They have had for 45 years, take your daughter to work week. They've never had a national take your son to work week.
Wow.
See, you have this matriarchy in the inner city and elsewhere, and the boys don't see manhood. They don't even know what it looks like. They want it, but the only thing they've got is this fake, really female thing, gangster hip-hop video, where the imagery is just a male edition of a gold digger. How you support yourself. You got ladies take care of them, you know, like get the opposite sex take care of you.
Wow. Well, actually, it's like I'm wrapping up. You met PrINce before? Have you met?
I never met him, but my ex-wife did opening acts for him about 25, 30 years ago when he was on the Purple Rain tour. She sang with Sheila E. I had a fine ex-wife.
Yeah, I see the picture. You picked well. I see the picture of your girl. You were good. You're doing good. So what do you think work about PrINce? Because PrINce, you know, he wore high heels and the eyeliner, but he still...
Yeah. I mean, he's an entertainer. I don't know.
But he still had a lot of women, though. Women love PrINce.
Yeah, I know. I didn't like the imagery. I didn't like it with Little Richard, though. He tries to explain it away by saying back in the 50s he needed to do that so he wouldn't get lynched. But we've had a number of those entertainers like that. Michelle Jackson, a.k.a. Michael, I thought was a disgrace. And, you know, I was a criminal court judge. I pronounced the death penalty on more than one occasion. I never thought it did any good. I thought about the only offense that fitted the death penalty was pedophilia, and he got under that umbrella in the rain, talking about he didn't see anything wrong with a grown man being naked in the bed with a 10-year-old boy who was not a relative just to show love. And I said, oh, that's too sick. But, you know, when they have a rerun of that last little number he did, whatever it is, I refuse to see it. They'll be down at the Paradiso or something. They'll have it at 8 of the stages down there. And all the little mothers bring their little sons dressed up like Michelle Jackson, and they bring them in there and they idolize them, and the deceased, if he weren't buried with the worms or whatever it was, would probably love to seduce their little boys and play with them. So, you know, it's kind of sick.
But do you believe that PrINce or Michael Jackson was a foul play involved in their death?
No, self-hating somebody. All that surgery, the plastic surgery that looked like he's white, he had his melanin cells destroyed by laser surgery. And if you ever see this thing that Spielberg did, the making of the video thriller, there's one scene where his little skinny, no chest self is sitting in a barber chair, and he's as brown as he ever was. And on his face, there's a sharp line that goes down on his jaw where he has had laser destruction of his melanin cells. and he didn't like his hair, so every few months they would peel his scalp back and re-knot the Polynesian hair that they had implanted.
Wow.
With little knots through washers inside his skull out. He was supposed to have been sleeping in an oxygen tent, and that was because he had so much surgery on his nose that it was getting necrotic, so they had to amputate that. So sometimes when you get a close-up in his last few performances and he really gets to sweating, you can see the tape holding on the prosthetic nose.
Jeez.
He looks like a Japanese anime cartoon. And it's a disgrace for somebody to be idolized by the public who is so obviously self-hating. Those kids weren't his. And for that, they have an interesting thing. Pope, second before last, he did a 2-hour concert singing the castrati songs. Beethoven, Bach, Mendel, they wrote these castrati songs, and in order to sing them, you had to be a male who had been castrated before puberty. So the last one that was able to sing that supposedly was some Italian peasant that some monks castrated back in the late 19th, early 20th century in the hill country of Italy, and he died in 1952. Well, Michael is supposed to have sung 2 hours worth to the Pope, so you're not supposed to be able to sing them if you had balls when you reached puberty.
Wow. That is fascinating. What about PrINce? You think PrINce was a foul player? Or
No, I don't know. It's like Elvis Presley, and, you know, Marvin Gaye, and Janis Joplin, and what's the one that the white folk loved?
Marilyn Monroe?
No, the black guitar player.
Jimi Hendrix.
We never listened to it back in the day when everybody was radical. Black folk didn't listen to Jimi Hendrix. And I saw a special on him when it said the 2 guys were talking to him with his only black friends. He always hung around nothing but whites. We thought that was such white music. But he died, you know. It's like this thing, I guess the pain of being an artist and having a whole lot of money and not having anybody to love or anything like that. You get to feeling bad about yourself and you do drugs, or you got pain tolerances that are low. And PrINce supposedly was taking Percocets as a painkiller because he'd hurt his hip jumping off of speakers with high heels on. I mean, I like his music. Like I said, I don't care whether you're gay or not. That's your business. But you know, he's a great entertainer. I didn't like Michelle Jackson. I can't stand pedophiles. And he was just...
But they could never prove in court that
he said it.
I'm talking about what he said about the lying in bed.
Yeah, that's pedophilia. He said it out of his own mouth. Unless they, you know, manufactured that tape with his little whining.
What about, like, you know, with Jerry Sandusky, they said Joe Paterno knew since '76 that he was involved in molesting boys.
I don't even know who that is.
Penn State assistant coach to Joe Paterno. The guy was...
You know, I played football in college for a while, played in high school, but sports are sports. It's like Magic Johnson told some kids one time. I've known his family and him for 30, 35 years. He said, I played basketball because it was a sport. My ambition was to be a businessman. He said, that was just something to do on the way, and it got me a steak. I turned out to be good at it. But, you know, it's like, what I think about the sports thing, it's like Julius Caesar said it more than 2,000 years ago. Mark Antony is supposed to have asked him, do you think the Roman mob will tolerate you being dictator for life? He said, give them bread and circuses and they won't care what we do. In other words, feed them and entertain them. And in other words, sports is a primary entertainment. The Kardashians are primary entertainment. The housewives are an entertainment. You entertain them and they don't pay attention to what's going on for real. See, at different types of thinkers. I won't go into it. It's type 1 through type 5. Type 5 tends to be a genius in something. And Napoleon Bonaparte, general, and Caesar, Patton, something like that. And then you get people down where they can't think and they need fearless leader. I was in the show last night, and you know, at the end of the Marvel thing, you know, they have a habit of, while the credits are going on,
Right.
they will go back. And they did it twice, so stay through the credits. You have
Right.
2 of them.
Right.
Well, they had the kid, Spider-Man, young kid, and then they said, Spider-Man will be back. So all of these clowns started laughing. What's funny about Spider-Man will be back? They just flashed it as words on the screen. Ah! And some of the people in some of the audiences will laugh at stuff and you say, that's not funny.
Right.
They've been conditioned to think that's funny. And it's not. I had a friend that was a professor at UCLA until he retired. And he did an experiment. And what it was is they had sitcoms. And they took the laugh tracks out of these sitcoms and they left them in. So if they showed the sitcom without the laugh track, the group that watched a lot of TV would laugh at these things. The group that watched a moderate amount of TV would not laugh. And the people that hardly watched TV wouldn't laugh. If they played the same thing back with the laugh track, the people that watched a lot of TV would laugh a lot. The people that watched a moderate amount of TV would laugh when they saw the laugh track or heard the laugh track. And the people that watched little TV wouldn't laugh at all because it wasn't funny to them. So they condition you. And there's certain types of people that don't get humor. They don't get satire. Like the movie School Days. Been out almost 25, 24 years ago. Lawrence Fishburne was in it. And he was making a lot of fun of the wannabes and the jigaboos, the frat girls, frat queens, blonde hair piled up all on their head. He was making fun of it. And I would always, when Spike Lee had a movie, I'd go see it in a white theater, a black theater, and then with a moderate audience. The black audience is going, ooh girl, look at that. I've been trying to get my hairdresser to do my hair just like that. I want her to come see the movie so she can understand. So she's got hair this long. Like, what kind of weave are you going to have to put in somebody's head to do that? And plus it's being satirized as being ridiculous. There's a scene where Fishburne is talking up to the girlfriend on 4th or 5th floor of the dorm, and there's some clown little fat girls that can't get a date down like a couple of floors below that. And they're going, get on him, girl, don't give him any slack, man ain't worth nothing no way, you know, none of them are, I hear you girl, blah, blah, blah. So you see the unattractive girls in the audience just sitting right around you. I hear you, tell him about himself. So they're fitting right into what Spike Lee is satirizing and they don't realize it. And then you hear him say, I thought it was supposed to be funny. It wasn't funny. I said, no, it's called a satire. What's a satire? It's making fun of something. It's not trying to be funny. They don't get it. But I mean, white and black audiences, they started giggling at the dumbest stuff and don't get it. Or there's a line where Iron Man tells one of the people, the fan, the homeboy of Captain America is getting whatever he's getting. And he says, look, just because you got Manchurian Candidate here the audience doesn't even get the reference. That was to an old late 1950s movie with Frank Sinatra, and then to a remake later where these people have been captured by the North Koreans, and in the first one they'd say, let's play solitaire. And when you started playing solitaire and Queen of Spades or something like that came up, anything you told them they'd do. Go kill the ambassador, all right. So they didn't get the reference, but you see, they laughed at stuff that wasn't funny. And it's like slapstick, ha! And there was one big woman sitting down next to me. She was just being uproarious, just being loud and laughing like, you know, have you been smoking something? You know, got the giggles? You know, what's wrong with you?
Judge, I want to thank you so much for your time on this day, Mother's Day, to give all this wisdom out to the people. Do you have anything else you would like to say?
No, this is just a small slice of history that has a component going back 100 years or more all the way up to the present. Just watch what's going on. It isn't anything new under the sun. It's just inform yourself so you don't get gamed.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. In the words of great Duke Ellington, we love you madly. Keep on producing and pushing.
All right, we all